Michelle maybe two years ago about when this event was going to happen, if it was going to happen. I wanted to buy my ticket right away. I got a copy of Sally's book 2 years ago, and I read it over the weekend, and it swept me off my feet. And I was just intrigued by it. Who loves monsters in this room? Who thinks that Bigfoot is a monster? So Bigfoot is entered already now as a kind of an animal, real, semi-real creature. It's no longer a monster. But what about the Lake Worth monster? It's still considered sort of a monster realm, would you guys say? Does anyone here believe in the Lake Worth monster?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We got some.
So for me, personally, I just love stories. I love monster stories. To keep them going, I think, is extremely important. Whether it's found out it's a hoax, still believed real, if it has a legend, from the Native Americans from a while back. I first started getting interested I grew up as a kid in Northern California. So as a kid, you could go, kids here, so, at some age you find out about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and everybody. And living up there, it was still, when you talked about Bigfoot, it wasn't talked about with that secret humor. It was still talked serious. And there were people that had sightings that they would not want to share with anybody because they didn't want to deal with the ridicule. They would retire. There is a famous foot track that was done in Grays Harbor in Oregon that the sheriff, Hereford, found this track. He kind of let it get out, but he told everyone after he retired about this track. I was there 2 years ago, and I called the sheriff's department, and I said, hey, I just want to see if Sheriff Hereford is still in the area. Oh, he's moved away. Okay, well, I'm just curious, is there anyone else on the force that believes in Bigfoot? And the current sheriff goes, well, we all do. And so many of us seen it, because we drive these roads late at night. We drive past the beach, we drive everywhere. We see, people get disturbances, we go out there, and that's what it is. And he goes, but, you're not going to get me on camera saying that, because I don't want to be ridiculed. And no one on the force wants to be ridiculed, so they keep it local. And that's where local folklore, I think, is important, especially with younger generations moving away. I spent 5 weeks in the Himalayas in 2001 just collecting folklore of the Yeti. Because a lot of the younger generation were moving out of the villages, the older generation would tell a story, and then, the younger generation didn't really care about the stories. And the stories were nonchalant. They were like someone was going up in the morning, they were hunting, and they fell asleep, and they woke up, and there is this Yeti, very much like Patty. It was a female Yeti, older, sagging boobs, drinking water out of a boulder that had kind of where water could settle, as almost like a little bowl. And the hunter was just watching this Yeti drink the water. He was scared to death because in Nepal, and only in Nepal, it's really bad luck if you see a Yeti. And if it sees you and you make eye contact, it means you're going to die soon. Which is interesting because if you go to Bhutan, if you go to Tibet, if you go to Afghanistan and Pakistan and Russia, they all have this same creature in all of their kind of folklore, but they all have different beliefs on it for the interactions that they've had with it. If you go to Canada, it's really funny because everyone likes to say the Canadians are really friendly, but they go after Bigfoot, with rifles a lot, or at least back in the 50s and 60s. And nowadays you go to a Bigfoot conference, and if someone brought up rifles, you're going to have an argument, like almost politics, like, you can't be hunting a Bigfoot, it should be on the endangered species list. And then you have people who've been looking for it all the time, and maybe at the end they're just like, we gotta shoot it because we need to prove it exists. And it's really interesting. But if you go to Canada, the Sasquatch, the interactions with the Sasquatch with the Native Americans in Canada were a little bit more on the violent side versus the Native American interactions with the Bigfoot, or in Northern California it's called the Oma. And so it's just like in the Himalayas, it's really regional on how groups of people have feelings towards an animal, you know. I travel all over for forever looking for ghosts. I've dug for Blackbeard the Pirate's treasure, been in the King Tut's tomb to defy the curse, and yada yada yada. But my love is always Bigfoot, and I'll never forget being in Willow Creek as a little kid and eating at a diner and seeing the Jim McLaren statue, which is a famous Bigfoot statue in the middle of town, and asking about it, and I'm not getting just a clear answer from anybody. And then later on hearing friends' fathers tell stories of seeing a sighting. And in 2003, they had a Bigfoot symposium in Willow Creek. And I was very interested in hoaxers. I thought it was an extremely amazing personality to be a hoaxer, to go up there, to make these Bigfoot tracks, then to come back, convince your friends to go look for this thing with shotguns or whatever, to take time off work, to not tell them at the end, because they're just gonna, you know, you're gonna be in trouble, right? Maybe tell your wife. But John Green pointed out it's almost harder to believe that there are so many personalities of a hoaxer for how many copies of Bigfoot tracks that have been found. I mean, that would be just crazy to know there's this many people who are going to have this kind of secret, but they're still willing to go and tromp around. So when I was up there in 2003, there was a couple of people I saw that were just kind of by themselves in the back, and I like to gravitate towards those people, and I said, well, what, you know, why are you interested here? What is it about it? And there was one fella, he was from India, and he said, well, he said it was really weird. When he moved to the United States, he did what a lot of people do when they first move to the United States. He got a car, started in Los Angeles, and he drove cross country to New York, where he was moving for his job. And he drove the country, and he said in southern Ohio, he's driving, and there's this Bigfoot who walks across the road. He thinks nothing of it. He thinks this is just a, you know, giant ape monster. Not even a monster, just a giant ape. So 94, 95, the internet comes around, and he's at work, and there's a picture of a Bigfoot on the internet. He goes, oh, I saw one of those when I first moved here and drove across country. And his coworkers are like, no, you didn't. He's like, no, I did. No, you didn't. So for a few years, he thinks, oh, people are just jealous that I saw this elusive animal. And then he finds, oh no, only people who supposedly are a little crazy believe in this thing. And he had such a hard time with it for years that he had to go to this, you know, symposium to meet other people who didn't believe in this Bigfoot until they saw it. And at that conference, another lady I talked to was in the same spot. The local tribe there is called the Hoopa, and she had inherited her grandmother's house. And it was a Monday morning. She was going out to get her daughter to get ready for school. And so she walks out with her cup of coffee. It's like 7-something. The school bus comes around through the reservation once, picks up all the kids, and goes out of the reservation to the school. So she's calling for her daughter. She walks around the left-hand side of her house, and there is her daughter, a fence, an apple tree, and a Bigfoot going like this. And she just freezes, and she's having to soak this all in. Here's this thing that her grandmother warned her about, that she just wrote off as a boogeyman until she was in her late 40s. And there it is, arm's reach of her daughter. Totally, her daughter busted this Bigfoot while it was stealing apples over the fence. And she said she could tell that they were communicating without talking, just having a conversation. And their daughter didn't look scared, the Bigfoot didn't look scared. But she was just, you know, she was just getting into her first cup of coffee on a Monday morning, 7-something. And she slowly grabbed her daughter and just walked off, and the Bigfoot just walked away, you know. And so for her, it was just like, this was the splash of water on her face, like, this exists now. And, you know, like, and that's just how it goes for a lot of folklore. You don't, it's a fun local story until it happens to you. I lived in a 100-year-old house that was haunted, and I foo-fooed ghosts forever. And then one day I'm by myself and the doorknob started spinning. And I knew the doorknob was broken and it was going to fall off. And I yelled at hoping it was my roommate was there, who fixed it and was playing around. It wasn't, and it would happen. And eventually we had to get a medium. The medium said, oh, it's a nice little old guy who had a heart attack working in the hallway, and, here at Fufu, it goes for so long, and it wasn't what I expected to see. It wasn't a scary situation. It wasn't like Ghostbusters or anything. And that was similar to these Bigfoot encounters to these people. It wasn't scary. And I think these encounters is what makes, general monster, people think monster, but then when it happens, it's like, oh, it's not a monster, it's a Bigfoot. And then the next thing you know, it's like locally loved. So for me, folklore starts off like this. Back in 1774, a fellow was born. He traveled to the United States. There's a businessman putting up nurseries all throughout Pennsylvania and the East Coast. Real smart guy. He said, people are going to move out to these certain areas. They're going to want to buy land. They're going to want to make alcohol. So I'm going to plant these trees that produce this fruit. It's not edible. It's only crushable, and it's meant for this ale, a cider. And he's like, I'm going to plant all these things. So he does this. He's successful. He's a real nice guy. He gives back to nature. He loves animals. He's like a vegetarian in 1774, right? And he's preaches the good word to kids. And eventually passes away, leaves all his money away. He walks barefoot and he just whatever. But he's known for planting these trees for making cider. Well, nowadays, kids know him. And you guys know him. He's Johnny Appleseed, right? And as a kid, you think, oh, your apple a day takes it, We don't look at him as this entrepreneur of nurseries for cider for drinking. We think of, eating apples and good. And there's a Lord's Prayer with Johnny Appleseed in it, So his story has grown with culture and what we want him to be, or what we want Johnny Apple, with the tin can on his head. He's changed. But really, he's just like a real nice guy and maybe a little eccentric. There is, I think Craig was talking about sushi. So it reminded me of this story in Japan. They have these things called a kappa, K-A-P-P-A, and they're a little water goblin that hangs out in small ponds. And there's lots of ponds that'll be a warning, here's the kappa. And what you would do is you walk past it, and the kappa will come out, and it will try to attack you. It's known for eating kids. It's a good way, it was a deterrent for a lot of parents to get kids away from ponds and accidental children drowning. There's no kids here, so what kids would do is they would get a cucumber, they would write their name on the cucumber because these goblins love cucumbers, and they throw it into the pond. And that's, hundreds of years they've been doing this. So, next time you go and you get sushi at a Japanese place, look at the cheapest thing to order, and probably right next to a California roll, you'll see the kappa roll, which is this cucumber and rice. And that's because of this goblin monster that used to love to eat cucumbers, So, it's not, you don't really think about that very often. But next time you get sushi, just check out kappa roll, and then you'll be like, there's a goblin. This is a goblin's favorite sushi. It's kind of weird. So, I think like I was trying to say, traditions change throughout what our cultures wanted. Obviously next week is Halloween, and, everyone believes Halloween is for certain reasons. And the most interesting one is kids dress up as ghosts and goblins and kind of scary things. And a lot of people said, well, it was to scare off spirits. But the tradition was, it was the last few nights that these ghosts and goblins and spirits could go out and party. And so you dressed up so you could be one of them. Not participate, but not be bugged by them and still go out and do whatever you wanted to do. And so it's really neat. That's why, not a lot of kids dress like ghosts and goblins anymore, but back, hundreds of years ago, they all did. Because that's how you don't get, It's almost like if you see like whatever, those zombie TV shows where, you know, the real humans dress up like zombies so they don't get detected, you know? Have you guys seen these? I don't even watch this TV stuff. Yeah, but it's the same situation. You dress up like what you're scared of, then they don't bug you. So for me, the Lake Worth Monster is an amazing story for the fact that people saw it when there's people going around with guns looking for it, and that's pretty gutsy. I don't think that's something that you would normally do, and that's why I think it has some credibility for something being there. Who knows what it is? I always like to keep my spectacles, my skepticals on, but and I like to have all the doors open, and I invite all the stories and anything that I can hear about something. I don't like to say that more is crazier, because it always is, but I accept all of it because it's exciting, right? This is how stories begin, and what will happen in 50 years from now, in 100 years, what will happen 200 years from now to the Lake Worth Monster? Will it be like Johnny Appleseed? Will it have grown into this epic legend, And I mean, our descendants, my daughter's daughter, son may look back at the four-leaf monster, and it may be as a wild story as like the Tooth Fairy or something, So that's all. What I want to say is, if anyone has a good Lake Worth Monster story, or a story that they like to share, we are here filming a documentary on the Lake Worth Monster and on the importance of folklore, because it's just it's an amazing thing for a small town to have. Anyone have any questions?
I just had to think, are there any legends among the Indian tribes that were in this area about Bigfoot? I know when you talk about the northwest, up in Washington and California, they have a lot of legends and stories and names, but I just wondered if there were any Indians here.
I don't know. We asked Michelle yesterday, who's Michelle Villafranca, who's kind of like she's the queen bee of is that safe to say, the queen bee of this refuge? But I don't know. Craig would be the one to know. Craig and Ken would know that more than I, since I'm not from here. But I do reach out when I hear a good. In fact, 3 weeks ago, I was interviewing someone who is a cook at a restaurant, and she found out that I love Bigfoot stories, and she goes, I don't really tell this story very much, but there's this hike that goes through California, and she told this Bigfoot story. She had never believed in Bigfoot. She was just doing a hike. She's a hiking enthusiast, and they put the food up on a tree, for the bears, and it went up about 12 feet, and she's sleeping in her tent, and she said she heard the stomping at night, thinking it was a bear, nothing big, and then she heard this scream. She said it was so loud right into her tent that she knew, could not be a bear, could not be an elk scream. And then she heard, with no problem, the food getting rustled, which she knew was up 12 feet high, and then she said she heard what sounded like almost someone throwing 2 boulders the size of VW bugs into a lake right behind her tent. She just like these splashes, and then she came out and there was nothing there. So when she told me that, I went, I said, well, that's a pretty crazy story. So I instantly, the next day, I called the local tribe and I tried to see if there was any folklore of a Bigfoot. And then I ended up getting a hold of like a general store that the lady had run 6 generations back in the area. It was really interesting. Even though she had worked there for 6 generations, her family had been there for 6 generations, she goes, there's no Bigfoot in this area, we're too south. So she believed in Bigfoot, but she didn't believe that it was in that area. And that was really interesting, that she wouldn't believe that it was a Bigfoot, even though she believed in Bigfoot.
Did it seem as though she was being protective, maybe not telling the truth?
I don't know. I don't know. I was hoping that she would ask around to her relatives afterwards. Yeah, I don't know. She just seemed like I was calling her at a busy time, actually, but she was really sweet. But most people don't want to lie about it, or they don't want to share a story. I mean, Can I give you guys a really good graphic one? Okay, this is my good graphic Bigfoot story. A friend of mine's dad was driving, and he didn't tell me this for years because it was too embarrassing. But he's driving back from Willow Creek, which was only about an hour or less drive from where we lived. And we'd go up there because it was a lot warmer. There was a swimming hole as kids, and we'd always go to Willow Creek to dry out. Because where we lived in Eureka, where that newspaper picture where the guy Bob Pittman was holding, that's where the Eureka Times was from. And anyway, so he's driving back, and he's got pretty bad gurgle guts, you know, from what he ate from dinner. And he's got to pull over and go to the bathroom, right? He's got to do number 2 in the bushes. So he pulls over with my friend, my childhood friend, and everyone in the car, and he goes into the bushes, and it's totally pitch black, right? And this car comes around the bend, and he realizes, he's like, you know, with his pants down, he's like, oh, he's nowhere in the bushes. Because it was so dark, he just thought he was hidden, but he's just right on the side of the road, he realizes, and he's like so embarrassed. And then the car hits him with the high beams, and he's just like, are you kidding me, you know? And he's just like, you know, there, and he turns and looks, and right when he looks, like 10 feet away, like where the wall, this Bigfoot is right there, and just goes flonk, 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 and it's out. And he realized then that this car didn't care about him. It wasn't even looking at him. It was looking at this Bigfoot, hit the high beams. He just threw his pants on, got in the car, and drove the whole 45, 50 minutes home. And he kept it a secret because it was so embarrassing, you know.
So you travel all over the place?
All over the place, yeah.
Just on a whim?
Whatever passions I like. I got interested in the folklore of the Roma or the Gypsy people, so I went through training through Transylvania.
Are you leaving right after you speak, or?
Huh?
Are you leaving right
Oh no, I'll be here hanging out with you. Yeah, so
you know, I always find that when you get out in rural places where, you know, there's a population of 817 people, you know, I always ask them, and they always think you're crazy, but then they'll go, well, you know, I do know somebody.
yeah.
And I always find out, and like I called the guy, the park ranger, and he says I'm a park attendant, but he comes back to my campsite later, and he goes, you know, there was a time we were hunting, and a rock the size of a football comes flying in front of us, and we turn and look at each other, and we look at the tree line, and the tree line is 30 yards away, and there's nobody standing there. And then we look at each other again, and we run off.
Yeah.
And he says, you know, there's no way anybody could have threw that rock, because it came from within the tree line. So I always ask, and always, you know, find, you know, somebody that has something. Like the cabins where I stay, the guy said his wife came flying in the driveway, and he said she doesn't like me telling his story. But she locked up the wheels, and he heard, you know, and he comes out, what? And she told him, she says, I thought it was a tree stump that they had left on the side of the highway in Mena, Arkansas. And she says, why did they leave that tree stump there? And then as she got closer, it was trying to turn its back and hide.
Wow.
And she, you know, overheated as Tim's getting home. They live right on the highway.
Yeah.
And there's nothing there. I have tree knocks there.
I wonder what I don't know. Do I have like 1 more minute to tell a last story?
We got about 5 minutes.
Oh, this will be a quick one. I was having a yard sale last month, and this lady came in, and I was selling some of my, I have like way too many Bigfoot books, so I was selling a few of them that I'd read. And this lady goes, oh, I saw one of those once, and really well-to-do lady, you know, and, you know, no reason to, you know, she was no reason to brag or anything like that. And I said, well, what happened? And she goes, well, we were taking a train, and we're going to Louisiana, and we were going through these, like, high grass swamps, and the train stopped. I forgot why. It was like either another train was coming or something stopped. And right when the train stopped, these birds started flying right over her window, and there's this Bigfoot just right there, looking right into her compartment, and she's batting her husband to wake up, and then the train goes. and it just stares at her inside the window, you know. It was like almost like the birds, like it was going for the birds or what, but you know, and she's like, it was just like for just whatever, for just those moments. She's like, now, you know, and that's a very nonchalant sighting, you know, and that's how it goes.
It's funny how you're interested in folklore and all this, just the storytelling and all of that richness. But now it's detail. It's telling behavior. It's telling things like the hiding. It's telling things like, I mean, science is finally, from these stories, whether it's Indian legends or not, that's why it's so good to talk to the Native Americans, because they've been here so long. But now it's science. It's telling you the whole picture.
Yeah.
Just these simple legends and stories.
I wonder if it's science
Throwing stones, throwing pebbles, these stones, to get people to move inside. I've heard different stories down in South Texas where, you know, having a house built and they're in a trailer outside and they like watching the people at night through the tree line, and they get up there and throw little pebbles just to get them to move around. And watch it. It's like they're watching TV. I mean, this is just entertainment for them.
Yeah.
Of course, they're wondering when they're going to leave so they can get the food or whatever, go through their garbage cans or whatever. But all this is just telling you everything about their behavior and just stories. Just people.
It was interesting when Ken was talking, I realized about science that, you know, most people don't accept things unless humans understand it fully and it's science, and they're like, oh, okay, now it exists because we understand it. And yet people are not willing to believe something exists unless it's proven. Yet we all live off of daydreams. We all live off of beliefs that are from, you know, another continent or two continents, or, you know, I mean, it's Sunday, you know, tomorrow. I mean, everyone, we all have beliefs that are from something that is faith, you know. And it's interesting on what people have faith on and question other faiths and whatever about, the, you know, all the way down to what has more nutrition, a green or a red apple, you know. So, but science is always the one that people say that's going to prove it all. But anyways, thank you, everybody.